Oh, I'm so sorry. I got in here for that was.
I saw you walk
Wait,
in.
Max?
You know what? I don't have time for an autograph. You go ahead and take this one.
No, Max, it's me. It's Molly.
Molly. Oh, my science. If you must know, I am seeing somebody.
Okay, that's great. Who is she?
She's actually my mecha partner.
You're dating a robot? All the Passionauts are together in one relationship. I'm a level 7 space witch now.
I think you're in a cult.
I can leave whenever I want to. I just don't want to because I'm like super happy. Are we in a cult?
Yeah, definitely.
Can I just clarify? Are we gonna sleep together?
You think we're compatible?
No. I mean, no, definitely not. But that can make for great sex. I'm not asking you to marry me.
Oh, marriage is definitely out of the question.
Okay, see, that's flirting. You're flirting.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I am ecstatic to talk to Michael Lukk Litwak, the director of Molly and Max in the Future, a fantastic film that we saw last year at South by Southwest. Michael, what's going on, man?
Not much. I'm happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
I am ecstatic to have you here because this was actually my favorite film of South by Southwest 2023. I love this movie.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I didn't realize that you saw it at the festival. That's really amazing.
I did. They sent us a screener of it last year. I sat here and watched it and just thought to myself, I want to see more happen in this world. I didn't want to leave those characters behind because I thought I love these characters. I thought Zosia Mamet and Aristotle Adhari had such fantastic chemistry, and I said so in my review of the film from South by Southwest. Can you tell people what this movie is about if they don't know what this is? Because it's a weird one.
It definitely is a weird one. The simplest way to describe it is that it's when Harry met Sally in space. And that usually kind of piques people's interest because I do think it's true. I do think we also, take it in a different direction and update it in a lot of different ways. But, I think it's a good jumping off point because essentially it's the story of two people kind of meeting each other over and over again over the course of 12 years. The story of a sustained friendship that kind of turns into a relationship and is a love story, but our kind of twist on it is that it takes place in kind of this insane sci-fi fantasy universe where anything is possible, and we use kind of the environment and kind of science fiction allegories and metaphors to kind of explore a bunch of common relationship problems and dating problems and kind of comedic situations that everybody can relate to.
I love it, and literally anything can happen, including being involved in a Cthulhu-like cult. So, this anything you think happens in a romantic comedy, you've never seen what happens in Molly and Max. And I wanted to ask you about casting because your four main characters really are Molly, was Zosia Mamet. You got Max, which is Aristotle Latari. You have Maria, who's Aaron Dark later on in the movie, and then Walter, my boy Arturo Castro, in that role. Those are really the four main pillars that move things kind of around. And then everybody sort of moves around that stuff. Mobius, Cassie, all those other characters kind of move around. What was it like casting this movie? Because from top to bottom, you have some really, really funny, people. Michael Chernus is hilarious, in those little cut breaks. As part of that backdrop, this is a hilarious cast. What went into casting all these people?
Yeah, I had been familiar with Zasha's work for a very long time because she was on Girls on HBO and The Flight Attendant, and she has so much experience, and everything she's in, she's just kind of inherently funny, and she has a lot of charm to her. She really knows how to play like very specific characters, but can also, has a lot of range. I think she's a natural improviser. And I really, when I was reading research about When Harry Met Sally, I read about how Rob Reiner really wanted to involve Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal in the rewriting of the movie and have them be kind of creative collaborators. And I wanted to pick actors that would challenge me, that would make the script better and give their input and have opinions on things. And both Zasha and Ari were really fantastic at weighing in, and we really workshopped everything together and read things through, and then I went back and rewrote them, and they were true collaborators in every sense of the word. So I found out about Zasha because she's been around for a long time, and I found out about Aristotle because he was on Saturday Night Live, and he has a long career as a stand-up comic behind him, and he also worked in sketch comedy, and has an improv background. And so to me, having people that have some sort of writing experience, having people that have improvisational experience, is so important, because they're able to kind of bring that extra spark and bring that extra magic, and really always take your writing to the next level and make it even better than you can ever imagine. And it was a similar thing with Aaron Dark and Arturo Castro, where they both have very large bodies of work where you can look at a very wide range of these really specific characters that they play, but they also kind of bring their inherent kind of charm and voice to things. And so Aaron was, I'd been very familiar with her work from Good Girls Revolt, and she has so much great stuff under her belt, but this was such a specific character because it was kind of this Katharine Hepburn parody. And she just came in and just nailed it from the first try. And she just, it's such a specific thing that you're parodying, and if you don't do it right, it can fall so flat. And she just blew it out of the park, and literally on the first try was word perfect. It was incredible. And then Arturo, I had been familiar with because of Broad City, and he's been doing amazing bit roles and stuff for a long time. And he was really an improv genius, and he, I don't think ever did the exact same thing twice. And some of my favorite lines in the movie were lines that he improvised, and he just really was just so on top of it. And he brought such an interesting energy to the room, because he really kept everybody on their toes. And when he was acting opposite Zasha, everybody had to really hold themselves back from cracking up to ruin the sound, because he would just come up with something casually brilliant, and he would do it every single time. And so a lot of it really is because people saw that Zasha was in the movie, and her having kind of vouched for it really, I think, made other people want to be a part of it. And I think they also probably liked the script too. But I think once you get a couple of really interesting people on board, then other people want to work with them too. And that really goes a very long way in terms of getting a great cast together. And so I just feel incredibly lucky to have gotten the cast that we got, and every one of them was just incredible.
They really were. And it's funny that snowball effect started with Zasha, because she is in these sort of roles, these romantic comedy roles. She's amazing. Like in The Boy Downstairs, she's an incredible and really funny actress. And you mentioned timing and improv, and I feel like that is where the influence that you took from When Harry Met Sally really is eminent. What other movies were you looking at? I would love to see these sort of elements included in this film. What other movies were sort of inspirational for this?
Yeah, definitely. It was a pretty wide range. I mean, on the romantic comedy side, probably the two other biggest influences are Annie Hall and then the Before trilogy. And I think both of those are just examples of movies that have a unique vision and a unique voice, but are about kind of people connecting over conversation, and about how, I think that there are so many different things that movies can be, but it's kind of amazing that you can just watch two people talk to one another and then be completely transfixed and moved by it. And I really love the Before trilogy, and just how those characters, because I think that in real life, that is how you connect with people. You talk to them and you hear their opinions and their dreams, and maybe what they say kind of challenges what you think, and then you kind of learn and you grow from them. And so that was really one of the bases of oh, you can have a movie that is just two people talking to each other, and it can be incredibly captivating. And hopefully we've also kind of provide some of that escapism, and make a movie like that isn't just two people talking together, but takes place in a world that people haven't seen. So that was definitely a huge inspiration. I mean, in terms of the sci-fi side of things, Blade Runner, Futurama, Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty and Futurama, I think, are great examples of shows that really know their tropes, really know their sci-fi history, and know how to kind of set up and pay off based off of that. And they're very kind of liberated shows in the sense that like they aren't really that constrained by rules. Like you can have one episode where time travel exists, and then you can have another episode where clones exist, and I love a sci-fi universe that isn't just constrained to one thing, because those are great too, but sometimes you have a movie and it's like one thing is different, and then you take that premise and you build a world outside of that. And I love that too, but I also love having a world where really anything is possible, and you can then use your science fiction and your fantasy to explore a variety of different things.
Well, speaking of that exploration, the writing in this movie is incredibly well done. So I have to commend you on that because you wrote the film as well, right?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
How did you go about like writing it? What was the process of writing it? Was it a time thing? Was it more overtime, or was it like I have this thing in me, I need to get it out?
Yeah, I basically moved to New York to go to film school, and I made a bunch of short films, and one of them did well and kind of got me some attention, and I got an agent and a manager, and then I spent kind of 7 years wandering the desert trying to get movies made. And I would write a new movie every year and try to get it set up, and sometimes we would succeed, and then we'd get to the next stage where you try to attach talent, and it's this kind of endless chicken and egg catch 22. And I had another movie that I wrote that was we had a lot of really good momentum behind it. We had some really cool people attached to it, and it looked like it was going to get made, and then the pandemic hit, and it just kind of completely imploded overnight, and the landscape of independent film kind of completely shifted. And so I kind of went back to the drawing board and was like, I need to write something that I know I can make, and I know that I need to know that I can make it without a ton of money. And if I have to, I will make it in my living room, and I'll make it with friends, and I'll make it with unknown actors. And like luckily we were able to kind of scale it up from there. But it really came from this place of like, I need to write something specifically that I know I can make. And so that was like one of the overarching kind of things leading into it. And then when I rewatched When Harry Met Sally, and I realized that, it's one of my favorite movies, but I realized that it is essentially two people talking to each other for an hour and a half. And, it doesn't feel like a mumblecore movie. It feels very, very classic, very traditional rom-com. And, I started just deconstructing it, and I love that movie. I think it's perfect, but it's interesting because when Nora Ephron talks about it, she's like, well, it's a movie that's 100% character. There's no plot in it. It's all character. And it's really refreshing because it doesn't kind of fall into some of those classic rom-com, like, oh, he misunderstood her, or like she needs to go catch the plane or something, like there isn't that like plot element to it that can sometimes feel very contrived. But when she was talking about how it was 100% character, I kind of found myself thinking, but like, you never really know what they do for a living. It doesn't really talk about the world outside of them. And to watch that movie in the middle of the pandemic, where all of our lives were being severely affected by the world outside the windows, and stuff like my career, was suffering because of stuff that was completely outside of my control. And so I think like character is not just the actions that you make, it's also the stuff that happens to you, and the way that you react to it, and the way that you persevere through it. And so I wanted to make a movie that was 100% character, but that also kind of took into account the different ways that we kind of build our characters, and the different ways our identities kind of exist in the world, where our careers and what we do for a living is a part of our identity, and factor into our relationships, and the way that your relationships can help you follow your dreams. I think is something that's really important. And so it really started with Molly's story of kind of ending up in this toxic relationship, and pulling herself out of it. And then from there, I kind of built Max's story. And I think a perfect rom-com is one where the characters kind of have a complementary kind of Venn diagram where they have enough in common that you realize that that they complement one another, but they're not too similar that they completely overlap, but they also aren't so different that they aren't. And so to me, it was kind of about finding these two characters and what are the journeys that they need to go on and how can they help each other grow and change and become better people because of that relationship. Because I think that is the true essence of a romantic comedy, is that it's about the power of positive intimacy, about how your relationships with other people can help you grow. And so it really started from that. And then, I wrote the first draft, and it took 3 to 5 months to kind of get it into a place that I was really happy with. And then, I continue to workshop and I continue to write up until we're shooting. And, I did 5 days of rehearsal with Zasha and Aristotle. And that was when, we would read through the scenes, hear them out loud. I'd go home and do another draft, come back the next week, do it again. And so it was really an iterative process of kind of trial and error and see what works. And then, of course, there's the final edit of, once you get into post-production, narrowing things down, tightening things, and making those final cuts and figuring out, like, what do you truly need to know in order to, move on to the next scene.
I love that. And you talked about the machinations of how your script was put together. And I wanted to ask you about subverting all those romantic comedy tropes, because you kind of do. There's no official meet cute, unlike most romantic comedies. It's just sort of meeting up at certain periods in time. There's no like official, that was it right there, the meet cute, you know what I mean? And you sort of subvert that trope. You also subvert that trope of like, these two characters, as an audience, we want them together because we, at the end of the day, we care so much about them individually that whether they're together or not is really inconsequential, because we love those characters. If they're together, that's amazing. If they're not, then perhaps that's what's best for them. Can you talk about like subverting those tropes and how you were maybe did or didn't try to do that on purpose?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, similarly to science fiction, I think the romantic comedy has all of its tropes. And I think that if you don't do your research and you don't look into those, you can end up falling into them unintentionally. And so for me, it was, one of the things that we kind of blatantly stole was the structure of When Harry Met Sally, in terms of, they meet once when they're 18, they meet again 5 years later, and then they meet for a third time, and then the rest of the movie takes place kind of in that capsule. And we have kind of 2 extended flashback sequences, so we kind of go a little bit more in a spiral or a circle in time. But I thought that was just an incredibly smart structure, because you also get to very clearly see this before and after of like the way that they were in this one stage of their lives, and then you get to compare and contrast it to the way that they were in another stage of their lives. And so I think that you have your tropes and your structure of a romantic comedy. And I think the best romantic comedies, you really feel like that the character, you believe that they know each other well enough to be making an informed decision about whether or not they're going to be together. And one of my biggest pet peeves is watching a romance in a movie, whether it's a subplot or a main plot, and 2 characters just see each other and they fall in love, and you have no idea what their relationship is based off of, other than just thinking that the other person is hot. And I really think that, looking at the Before trilogy, looking at Annie Hall, looking at When Harry Met Sally, like, you really feel like you've seen a number of different sides of their personality. You've seen them in situations where they're in control. You've seen them in situations where they're out of control, and making sure that you find the ways that they're able to kind of help one another is what is like that lifeblood of that genre. So it was definitely, a process of looking at inspiration, and then figuring out what I wanted to keep, and then how we would do things differently, how we would kind of update it for today. And I think there are some romantic comedy cliches in the sense of like the man's always more sexually aggressive than the woman. And there were things like that I very intentionally kind of upended, where Molly is a lot more of the sex positive one, and Max had a little bit more hangups on his body and his relationships. So there were a number of different ways that I tried to kind of play with that.
I like that, and I also like that in the entire time, even from the first meeting, Max is like Max to himself, and I can see it in the characters thinking to himself that their relationship is something that it isn't, and then
Yeah.
Molly correcting it the entire movie. And I think
Yeah.
that that's really, really, really refreshing. You mentioned like trying to do something different, and I want to talk a little bit about the way the film looks because that is the most jarring thing about this film, and it's a positive jarring, is that it looks nothing like anything I've seen all year last year, where
Oh,
it
thank you.
has this like tinge of like greens and blues and like a dreamlike state the entire time. It feels like a fever dream, a sci-fi fever dream. Can you talk about why that decision was made and what went into like I want this to look like a absolute dream? What went into that?
Yeah, totally. It's a combination of a number of different things, but the simplest way to explain it is that we didn't have money to make a giant Marvel movie version of this. And through, I think, constraints, sometimes creative solutions become really, interesting things that end up creating something a lot more unique. But and in retrospect, I don't think I would choose to make the Marvel movie version of things, but part of it was just that, this was a movie made by 12 people and it was a two-person VFX team. It was me and Zach, and we hired a couple of very select freelancers for certain elements of certain scenes. But from start to finish, there's 900 VFX shots, and me and Zach did 90% of them. And what that meant is kind of, Zach has a little bit more of a VFX background, and but neither of us really work as VFX artists. He's primarily a director of photography, and I'm primarily a writer director. But we've both watched a lot of YouTube tutorials, and we've both just kind of had to pick up a lot of our own skills over the years. And so, um, you know, over the last 10 years of making short films, I kind of just fell into this aesthetic of making everything by hand, building it yourself. It's not going to look as fancy and as polished as a huge blockbuster movie, but it will look handmade. It'll look intentional. And if you kind of lean into that constraint, then you end up with this world that feels handcrafted, that feels specific, and that doesn't feel computer generated. And so we spent about 18 months before we shot a single frame of the movie building out the world of the film. And so we would spend hours doing research, figuring out, what are the model kits that we can buy that we can glue and combine and paint together. And then shoot those models on a green screen, composite them, build a cityscape. And then by the time we were shooting, we could take that plate of the cityscape and put it up behind the actors and have them stand in front of it. So we shot about 30% of the movie on an LED stage. We thought we shot 30% of the movie on rear screen projection. And then we shot 30 to 40% of the movie on green screen. And so it was really kind of this mishmash of a variety of different techniques. We have stop motion animation, but really it came from this kind of practical first approach of, let's avoid CG at all costs. Let's have hand painted matte paintings. Let's have miniature spaceships. Let's have miniature sets. Let's do everything we can to avoid CG. And I'm not anti CG in general. I think that there's a lot of really amazing CG out there, but I just didn't feel like we could pull it off at the level that would look good. And so that really was the basis of it. And then, I think I just love working with colors. I love working with shapes. I love, trying to find visual ways to tell something that's internal. And we tried to always make those backgrounds kind of, expressive and a way to kind of show the interiority of the characters and the journey that they're going on.
And I love that. One of the things that is very evident is in those backgrounds. That's where that Blade Runner influence is definitely there because it looks like Blade Runner in some of the scenes, and I'm like, I can
Definitely.
see where he's going there. So we've asked you about the film, but I've never interviewed you before, so I wanted to ask you a little bit about yourself. So I always ask my guests when it's their first time on with me, some very specific questions, but I'm going to add an extra one. And the first one is the extra one. we shoot a podcast every month. Next month is February. We're talking romantic comedies. Your film will be one of my three choices because I think about how great it is, and I'm picking three different rom-coms from three different decades. Myself, all of my co-hosts, and our guests all pick three movies. We talk about them. What three movies would you pick if you were on the podcast?
Specifically romantic comedies?
Yes.
Probably before sunset, or sorry, probably before sunrise, Annie Hall, and When Harry Met Sally, because those are the three movies that I know the best and have watched them at least a dozen times each. And every time I watch them, as soon as I'm done, I'm like, I could watch that again right now. And I think that to me is like the mark of a masterpiece, is that as soon as the credits roll, you're like, let's do it again. I want to go see it again. And you know, whenever I feel that feeling, that to me is like the magic of watching movies.
I'm glad you said that because we ask every guest the same question, and that is, if there were only two movies you could watch for the rest of your life, what two would you pick and why? And this is always the question that I get the same reaction, which is, why would you do this to me?
Yeah, that is difficult. I mean, yeah, or watching two movies over and over again, that'd be tough. I mean, I feel like when I think about my top four, I usually go The Lobster, Amelie, Rushmore, and Jurassic Park. And to me, those kind of represent like the four polarities of like interesting, unique movies that provide completely different experiences that are all, you know, what make me love movies in different ways.
I love that. I love that. You have to cut that in half though. You only get two. This is
I
not
think I would
Letterbox.
maybe,
Letterbox gives you four.
yeah, maybe, hmm, maybe Jurassic Park and Amelie.
Those are two perfect films, in my
Yeah,
opinion. So
yeah,
great choices. I mean, Jurassic Park is, a cinematic experience that unlike anything. And being a little kid when that movie came out, like I was like 8 years old. It's a game changer when you're like
it's
8 years old and you
incredible.
see giant dinosaurs. And then
Yeah,
Amelie, I was the perfect age for that because I think I was like 13 or something. And you're like, this is amazing. It's just amazing, and it's so beautiful and cute. And Audrey Tautou is amazing in it, and she's
it's
the
incredible.
manic pixie dream girl of everyone's dreams, but also not. It's
It's
those are
true. It's
great
true.
choices. So
Yeah.
let me ask you, as a director, as a writer, as a person, who are people that you look up to, whether it be in your professional life or personal life?
Yeah, you know, I really love the Daniels. I think their work is incredible. I think they're out there making fearless original movies that are unique and interesting, and they're very open about, you know, being kind to one another. And you know, because I think there's a long history of kind of building up filmmakers to this mythical status, and then you find out that they're kind of secretly assholes or monsters are difficult to work with. And I think they're very vocal about kind of this new wave of filmmaking, which is that you need to treat the people you work with respect, and that you need to treat your collaborators with respect, and that you can do that but still have a vision and not, you know, have a movie filled with compromises. So I really look up to them. um who else? I mean, I love Ryan Johnson. I think he is in a similar camp too, where like he's making kind of fearless, original, bold movies that are, you know, incredibly original. And he also has a reputation as being a really nice person, that everybody enjoys working with. So professionally, I think they are two really amazing, amazing people. You know, I really look up to my wife. She's really awesome, and she's an editor, and she works really hard and is also an incredibly kind person. So I'm very inspired by her.
I love that. We've actually met both of those sets of directors you picked. The Daniels we met at Sundance, and they're great. And we met Ryan Johnson at another festival, and he's just the nicest dude. So I
Yeah,
love that
that's
you
what
picked two
everyone
people
says.
who are genuine. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
genuinely nice people. The Daniels were so cool. We were there for the premiere of The Death of Dick Long at Sundance, and it
nice.
was that movie's insane. But you're right. They're doing things that are bold, and that's what I love about this movie. Is it's bold. It takes steps that I've never seen in romantic, and I've seen every romantic comedy. I've seen them all, Michael.
Thank you.
And
Yeah,
this is not like anything I've seen. So
yeah. Thank you. I do think I that's something I really value in other people's films too, is just like, regardless of whether or not it necessarily always lands, like the ambition is something I always respect. You know, it was scary to make this because I feel like I had never seen a movie like it, but I also hope that you know, it has enough in common with lots of other movies that people can kind of see, you know, that it's part of a long line of and tradition of both romantic comedy and science fiction films.
I can definitely see that. And this movie comes out on February 9th. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're going to be in theaters, which is kind of insane. February 9th. And then, you know, there will be different theaters kind of trickling in and out, but all of that information will be at mollyandmax.com. So MOLLI, mollyandmax.com. We're also on social media where we're posting a bunch of behind the scenes stuff that talk about kind of how we made the film and, you know, giving a peek behind the curtain. So that is also another way to kind of stay in touch and find out what's going on with the movie.
I love that. And if people want to reach out and speak with you or mention your movie or talk about the movie with you, where can they do that if they want to?
So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on TikTok. You know, I also have I have an email address on my website. So you know, you can find me if you look for me.
I love that. And do you want to leave the audience with any sort of message or say anything about the film before we let you go?
I mean, I think that it's important to support small movies, and you don't get your Everything Everywhere All at Once, or you don't get your Star Wars Episode 8 or Knives Out without going to see a director's first film and talking about it and spreading the word to your friends. And you know, everybody likes to complain about how there aren't original movies anymore, and this is an original movie. It's out there. You know, go support it and go shout it from the rooftops and tell your friends.
I agree. There's no Knives Out without Brick. So, I mean, you know, you
It's
got to go
true.
see them. You got to go see these small movies. And I'm a big fan. So I'm going to be preaching to I'm going to be preaching the gospel of Molly and Max because I love the movie. Guys, make sure you check it out
Again.
February 9th. Michael, Lukk Litwak, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank
You
you,
have a
man.
great
I
day.
really appreciate it. This has been really fun, and thank you again.
Of course.